When you look at the AppSec space here now in 2026, even going back, say, 18, 24 months, what's genuinely new versus what's just the same problem kind of wearing a new costume?
I would say that 18 months ago, people were still trying to do DevSecOps. They're still trying to get a million tools running in their pipeline and creating these giant backlogs that made developers cry.
People who approach me like, yeah, I want to write a book, and some of them are thinking for the money. I'm like, don't do it for the money. Like, definitely don't do it for the money.
Using AI assistants to write pretty much the entire app and pretty much all of the code, such that there is not really a human in the loop, like in your newsletter recently, which was so good. You know that XKCD comic where the guy is like, oh, we could break your passwords in all these ways. And then the guy's like, I have a wrench and I'm going to hit you with this wrench until you tell me your password.
Why do you think when we discuss software supply chain security, we always focus on the digital aspect, right? But we ignore the actual developers, like the people. Why do you think that is?
I'm going to say something extremely cynical, and it's because vendors don't know how to solve that problem.
Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Tanya Janca. Tanya, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on and chat. I think last time we spoke live was at not RSA this year, but last year in a little kind of ad hoc, a video that we did. But, for folks that don't know you, which I imagine is not many in my audience, but folks that don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background as well?
Absolutely. I was a software developer who got attracted to the dark side and joined application security. And then I started speaking all the time so that I could get in free to conferences. Then I started writing because I was like, oh, what if I could just do a lot of work but make no money? And then I wrote a couple of books. And right now I'm teaching secure coding and secure AI and things like that for large companies. And I'm having a very good time doing it, Chris.
That's amazing. I couldn't help but laugh about the book thing because, it's like I have people who approach me like, yeah, I want to write a book. And some of them are thinking for the money. I'm like, don't do it for the money. Like, definitely don't do it for the money. It's more so, credibility and network and, you become an expert in the things that you're writing about, obviously. But yeah, don't do it for the money for sure. So you're spot on there. But to kick us off, I wanted to ask, speaking of books, you had written a series of books, titled Alice and Bob, right? These key characters that you wrote about. And they're very popular in the AppSec space. I have them on my bookshelf here behind me. But you wrote them, if I'm not mistaken, before kind of the Gen AI, AI coding agents, kind of all these different things that we're seeing happen hit. When you look at the AppSec space here now in 2026, even going back, say, 18, 24 months, what's genuinely new versus what's just the same problem kind of wearing a new costume?
Oh my gosh, Chris, there are so many problems now. I would say that 18 months ago, people were still trying to do DevSecOps. They're still trying to get a million tools running in their pipeline and creating these giant backlogs that made developers cry and that no one was addressing, basically. Right? Like they're like, let's fix bugs in the new app we're building and all that legacy stuff. I'm just going to close my eyes and pretend it's not happening and maybe it'll be okay. And now we have people vibe coding. And by that, I mean using AI assistants to write pretty much the entire app and pretty much all of the code, such that there is not really a human in the loop, like in your newsletter recently, which was so good. I really liked it. Like I like it in general, but that specific one, I was like very I was like, it's inappropriate on the airplane for me to go, woo, someone gets it.
I had to do that one because, I feel like I go to like a lot of conferences and webinars and all these, and everyone's like, yeah, human in the loop. And like, we all know it's bullshit and everyone keeps saying it, but it's just like a rubber stamp mechanism. If even anyone's stamping it or looking, let alone, and then like Anthropic, had published data basically showing like no one's really reading these things, but I just wanted to say the quiet part out loud. It's funny because, Rob T. Lee at SANS, I just was up there this week and for their AI summit, and he pulled me aside. He's like, that one. He's like, thank you for saying what we all just wanted to say.
Yep, it was so good. And so truthful, just the same as, so there's this guy called the Primigium, and I follow his content, and he released this blog recently, and it's or he released a meme recently, and it's someone like offering wine to someone at like the dinner table, and the person offering is Microsoft, and then what it's offering is GitHub, is Copilot, and then the person is like no, and then it's like everyone. And I am seeing this with like SCA tools and like companies like startups in this supply chain space, and they're like, everyone is subscribing to Copilot, and then all their devs have these $20 cloud accounts. They're actually doing all the coding, and the security team does not have, because like I've worked with clients and they say that's what they're doing. I'm like, go look at your network right now. And then they call me later and they're like, oh my God. And so sometimes a meme, it doesn't speak 1,000 words, Chris. It speaks 1,000 conversations and incident reports. And so what has changed? Like, people are vibe coding and they're not checking it. And we have CEOs releasing new websites because they're pissed off at the marketing team, and they vibe coded over the weekend and just pushed a prod. And security teams being told they're supposed to secure that crap. That is what we have going on. And we have companies that are still like deploying old traditional, or as Chris Romeo called it yesterday, classic application security tools. Like when I joined the older sports league and they call us the Legends League, they don't call us middle-aged.
Gotta give you something to make you feel a little bit better about ourselves as we get older.
Yeah, totally. Legends, not old. But that's what's happening, Chris, and we need to do things in a new way for sure, which I bet we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
soon.
we're definitely going to get into that. I want to, before we get down to some of those things, I wanted to ask you too, like the OWASP top 10, got a makeover in 2025. I'm curious, you're heavily involved there, obviously. Like when you look at it, they introduced 2 new categories: software supply chain failures and mishandling of exceptional conditions, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And they also folded some things in, like SSRF got folded into broken access control, security misconfiguration jumped from number 5 to number 2. When you look at that list, what are your thoughts? You got right, got wrong, anything you would change, or how do you feel about it?
So I really like the list. You should know that this one is a baker's dozen. So there's actually 13. So if you read the what's next at the bottom, we could not help ourselves. And we added vibe coding, even though we don't have the data for it, but everyone knows it's true. And then we added memory management problems because it's just a giant disaster. And even if only the SaaS tools are telling it's true, I assure you the security researchers are showing us it's true with those bug reports. And then we had a tie for 10, like lack of application resilience versus mishandling of exceptional conditions. And it was literally, like with millions and millions of records, I think the difference was 2, right? So that's a tie. And essentially when we looked at them, so mishandling of exceptional conditions means you're not doing error handling at all, or you're doing it poorly, or like what you're doing results in a race condition or something else bad, where lack of application resilience means your app kind of falls down and it can't really get back up. And if you handle errors properly and safely and well, you solve the lack of application resilience most of the time, right? And so I was like, what is the purpose of this document? To raise awareness and get change. And when things, like you said, fall off the list, Chris, first of all, I get this special flutter in my heart of happiness that the work we're doing matters as project leaders on the most popular OWASP project of all time, that all our writing matters and all of this data collection matters. But also, we're trying to change behaviors, and changing behaviors is hard, especially like look at broken access control still being number 1. We still suck at that really badly. So we're screaming it from the rooftops again, hoping that people hear us again, right? The other big change that you said, that you mentioned and that I want everyone to know about is we switched from vulnerable and outdated components to the entire software supply chain, because I have a feeling that you are the type of nerd that I am that like actually looks at the Rise and Breach report and the CrowdStrike reports and all of that. And if we look at the past 2 or 3 years, so they'll call it a supply chain attack, Chris, but if we really think about it and you read the fine print, it was not all of them, but a lot of them. It was actually a software developer, a human being that was compromised, and that broke open multiple parts of the supply chain. And now what we're seeing is malicious actors actually targeting like individual software developers. And we haven't had like a physical attack that I'm aware of yet. And I hope that day never comes. But like I listened to Darknet Diaries, the Maddie Stone episode a few months ago. And she talked about how basically she reported all these vulnerabilities in Android and she shared them at Black Hat in a room with 200 people, and then they all got fixed a couple hours later. Then she went to Israel to Blue Hat, and like these two men cornered her from a company from Pegasus. And like, I can't even imagine like the conniption fit I would have of meltdown of, right? Like to be like physically being questioned about vulnerabilities I've been fixing, or in her case, finding, and then squashing, right? And I feel like, you know, that XKCD comic where the guy is like, oh, you know, we could break your passwords in all these ways. And then the guy's like, I have a wrench and I'm going to hit you with this wrench until you tell me your password. Do you want to tell it to me before I hit you with the wrench or after? And I would be like, here's my password. Right. And so I fear they're even robbing them, Chris. So there's a new NPM worm today, and it's robbing their crypto wallets because it knows that devs are the type of people that have crypto wallets. Jerks.
Yeah, so very
Sorry.
a few things you said there I want to hone in on. First is like the dark scenario of like physical intimidation or violence, right, against developers. And but you know what you were really hinting at there, you know, aside from that darkness aspect of it, is like the software supply chain. Increasingly, the developers are becoming the target more so than the software components per se, and it's happening via the developers' endpoints. It's happening both in proprietary and commercial code, right? They're going after open source maintainers via social engineering attacks, as we saw, right, with the XEutils, where they pretend to be a contributor, then they, you know, kind of befriend someone, all these kind of things. And then obviously in the commercial sense, going after you know, endpoints that they work from. Same in the open source sense. Like, why do you think about you know, why do you think when we discuss software supply chain security, we always focus on the, I guess, like the digital aspect, right? But we ignore the actual the developers, like the people. Why do you think that is?
I'm going to say something extremely cynical, and it's because vendors don't know how to solve that problem. They want to sell you a product, and what their product is good at is finding vulnerable and outdated components, and it's not good at like being able to lock down your CI and also your code repository and also the developer workstation and also this and also that and also this, right? They're not good at that yet. So why would they tell you that? And that's like a big problem with the data collection for the OWASP top 10 is that we have all of these vendors that send us their data. And then we have, you know, a couple of quite frankly, wonderful pen testing companies that anonymize and format their reports such that we can use those too. But people aren't sending us their post-mortem incident reports. And like I spoke last week at Snowfrock, which is an OWASP conference, and I was like, oh, people that are responding to like application security incidents and software incidents, put up your hands. And maybe like a third of the room put up their hand. I'm like, for the 2/3 with their hands down, sorry, you don't know, because you're definitely having incidents. And so like the rest of the talk, I kept like, I'm like, this one's for you, because like a lot of people don't even know how to look for it and see that. And so then we're not getting data that shows us like vibe coding is killing us or whatever the things are, because we're so afraid to share that data because it is the most sensitive data, of course, Chris, right? It's hard to even get that data. It's hard to even know that you're being attacked in the first place. Like a lot of these supply chain incidents, they don't even know they're happening until it's way too late.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I wanted to ask you too. You used the term, you know, vibe coding, which I think we're all familiar with at this point. You know, there's kind of a debate in the industry, I'd say, where some, you know, feel that term is unfair, like it's kind of derogatory, like I'm not a vibe coder, I'm doing AI engineering, right? And there is something to that in the sense that like there's a big difference between someone who has no development and or security background, just, you know, asking for something and throwing it out there in production versus someone who's truly, you know, using AI as a force multiplier on their years of expertise and experience. Like, how do you think about that term and or the difference between that and AI engineering or AI, you know, driven development, those kind of things?
So I would define vibe coding as the AI is writing all the code or 99.9% of the code. You are not reading and or understanding the code, and then you're submitting it as your own work. And whether you're a security expert, a security researcher, a CEO, or a marketing person, you're still vibe coding if that's what you're doing, versus a person that is building software and using an AI to help them. That's completely different. That's like using any tool set, right? You can use a hammer safely, or you can be Tanya and bash your thumb with it, right?
Yeah.
I try not to, right? And you can also use a hammer as a paperweight, right? And have it not really be very effective. And so I think we can misuse almost any tool. And I think that having no oversight over an incredibly powerful system is always a stupid mistake.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a good way to frame it. Like it's a tool, right? And it could be used for good or bad, or used well or not so well. And honestly, I'm sure you may follow Simon Willison already, but he had done an interview with I want to say Lenny Kay on the his podcast, a product development podcast, I think it is. But anyways, he talked about Strong DM, and they had put out this blog. If you haven't read it yet, go check it out. It's called like Dark Factories, and they're talking about like using AI driven development and not even reading, not only not writing, but not even reading the code. And that's like the direction that some organizations are going, which is really crazy, I guess, when you think about it. That's the direction that we're moving in. Is not only is there exponentially more code being developed, it's being developed by AI. Humans aren't even reading it, let alone let alone writing it, but not even reading it as well. It's crazy times. Yeah, it's really interesting times.
I'm currently negotiating a contract to build a security program for a dark factory.
There you go. So you're familiar with the concept, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And trying to build a security program for that will be an extremely exciting challenge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's cool is like it's intimidating and scary and it sounds crazy, but it's also pretty damn exciting too. Like this is something we've never done before and we haven't worked this way, and it's a new paradigm. So it's exciting too.
I feel like our security programs are going to basically need to be completely reworked. The way that we've been doing things sucked. Like to be quite blunt, like for the AppSec engineer, basically like when I was a dev, I used to have inbox 0 most days, and I would complete my work most days, and I'd go home and my brain could go do my yoga class or my sports or whatever I was doing, go play music and not really think about things. But when I switched to security, I literally could never, ever, ever get through all the tasks that I needed to for that day. And then there'd always be other things. And then there'd be an incident, and then everything's completely screwed. And like, I remember working at places as an AppSec engineer and having the developers write me through my LinkedIn, because then I might answer them on the weekend because they need to talk to me so badly. And they can't get at me because there's 2,000 of them and one of me. And like, it's not been working. Right. And it's certainly not working for the developers either. Like, they have not been loving this.
No, I always cite this. There's this study that Harvard and the Linux Foundation did together around AppSec and software security. And in that study, they surveyed a bunch of like open source developers, and they called security a soul withering chore. And I was like, that sounds about right.
Yes, and so we need to rework our AppSec programs too. And we were doing DevSecOps, and the ideas is like, oh, we're going to automate as much as possible. But what we did was we found a trillion things, and most of them don't matter, right? And we then made like this giant amount of work that's toil for developers, and just tons of false positives and like misinformation and breaking trust, and also just spending a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Those tools cost a lot of money. And so I am looking forward to new AppSec tooling that does things a different way. And I've had lots of startups like show me various things, but I think I'm going to need to build something because I have some weird ideas, which one day we'll get to later. But I think that we need to, I know that shifting left's like a swear word now, but I think that we need to actually have security start inside the AI. I don't think that it can start after.
So I had, speaking of that, I had Jack Cable on from Corridor on my show like a week or two ago, and he was kind of saying the same thing. Like, we've shift left, we didn't do it well, right? And we didn't have the technology and the tools at the time, and also we just implemented it wrong. We beat people over the head with these spreadsheets of findings, and then if they didn't want to do it, we said, well, security is everyone's job, and shamed them. And now we have the opportunity to like use AI to truly kind of insert it into the IDE and the SDLC in the ways that we couldn't do before. So it is exciting in that way. I wanted to ask you, Alice and Bob, Learn Secure Coding, that came out before, I believe, Copilot and Cursor went mainstream. Obviously, Claude Code. When you look at these AI-generated coding tools and like the modern SDLC, what do you think the dominant failure mode that you're seeing is in AI-assisted development? Is it models, being trained on vulnerable open source and kind of reproducing old vulnerabilities? Is it inventing new ones, hallucinations? Is it just amplifying poor development practices and insecure code? Like, what do you think some of the dominant failure modes are, I guess, of doing this activity?
So it was trained on terrible code, so then it creates terrible code. It also was trained on code where security wasn't important, and so we literally taught it that it's optional and or low priority. Like that's what it learned. And that's what it should learn, right? Like, so I teach secure coding and I taught at this conference and I taught a stack analysis tool that will remain unnamed. And at the end, this lady dev put her hand up and she said, today I learned that SaaS is a waste of damn time and that it's full of false positives. And that if I just review your checklist, I'll write code that's 10 times better. And I know more than the SaaS does. Thanks. And I was like, no, that's not the lesson. She's like, yep, SaaS sucks. That's why I learned. I'm like, no. And then everyone just nodded at her. And I was like, damn it.
Yeah. So on that note, speaking of SaaS, like, and you talked about this a little bit of some of the startups and innovation underway. There's been some cool research, both from like the AppSec vendors, obviously, but also in academia of, pairing LLMs and SaaS, right, to drastically reduce false positives and also find, vulnerabilities that SaaS traditionally couldn't find, right? Rules-based semantic type searches and so on. Like, what is your thought of how SaaS is evolving and other broader AppSec tools too?
So here's the thing is that developers used to, so were you a dev, Chris, at some point?
No, I never have been a developer. Like I would fall into the, I came up through system administration, help desk, networking, and like, cyber and all that. So I never had a development background.
Okay, so I come from a long line of software developers, all my aunts, most of my uncles. And I learned to code as a teenager. I had a computer when I was only 8 years old. And so then I was already coding for years before I got my first job, like the moment I turned 18 years old. And I started my first startup when I was 23. Like I was like, yeah, I love coding. I did coding professionally like 17 years before I switched to security. And you would have to go to meetings and sometimes you'd have to do documentation and sometimes you'd have to speak to other humans and those things sucked, but you put up with it so that you got to write code. Like I'd put on music and I would just flow into the machine and just solve and crush problems all day. And it feels very good. We've taken that away from them. And now we're like, guess what? The SaaS tool found twice as many things wrong for you to clean up in code that you didn't even write. You get to clean up someone else's crap. And it's not even a person, so you can't even ask them about it. Although I do ask Claude, what were you thinking? And so we've made their jobs just way worse. That's where the job title Slopperator is coming. And like all these other new fun job titles. I actually really loved fixing bugs. I've had many of my teammates refer to me as the bug slayer previously because like I just really liked that for what because it's complete and perfect and done. And I love puzzles, but most devs don't like fixing bugs. That is not their joy at all. I was like weird that I liked that. And as a result, like we're just giving them like janitorial duties now. And like SaaS, like, look at this, I found more. And they're like, thanks. I also think that them like sorting out the false positives, that's great. I think GitHub and SemGrep and I think one other one, what they're doing is like auto remediation of some of these. And like, that's nice. That sounds good. Theoretically, like if those work, right, that sounds lovely, but it's late, right? It's still after the inception. It's after the developer's done and they're sitting there. They have to check these bugs and recompile and see if things work, etc. So it's still like maybe less sloppy. I don't know. Someone I know was talking to me. She got to work with Mythos, which is a new model from Anthropic that finds vulnerabilities. And she was saying they had to make these harnesses. And it was actually this huge undertaking in order to set it up to enable it to do the testing, which she's like, so, it's not like they're going to point it at yourwebsite.com and just shatter you in 1 minute. She's like, but it was pretty much all true positives and like completely terrifying things. And we thought we had pen tested until we were blue in the face. But apparently, no, we missed a million terrifying things. And so, is that helpful? Yes and no.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Mythos because I never gave you these questions in advance, but my next question actually brings up that. We've talked about the generation side of it, like creating the code, right? Now there's Mythos and kind of an offensive, defensive asymmetry that, has always existed. But, Mythos, came out, right? It dropped earlier this month, and they said they found thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities autonomously, including major operating systems, web browsers. Like Firefox has a good blog on it today about the end of 0 days or something like that. You should go check it out. I just started reading it earlier. But AppSec teams, like, they've always been outnumbered, as you said. There's 1,000 developers and one AppSec engineer, for example. What does it mean when the attacker side gets this kind of force multiplier? And, like, what's the realistic defensive playbook in this new paradigm?
So I'm Canadian, so obviously I have to play hockey because otherwise they take our passports. Same like if we're rude. They just take it away. Um, and so I have played a lot of hockey in my life, and I would play defense. But the goalie has the hardest job in sports because just one thing needs to, they block hundreds of shots a game, but one gets in and everyone's like, you suck, buddy. Right? And that's how it is for us defenders. I think that we are going to really, really need to change the way that we build software so that it actually tells us when something's wrong. So I teach tons and tons about error handling and like how to have alerts and how to log and all of this stuff. And it's 2 of the OWASP top 10. It's lack or poorly logging and then and no alerting. And then there's the mishandling of exceptional conditions. And we're not doing a good job, Chris, of that at all. And so as a result, we don't even know when we're being attacked. And so I feel like an issue of, we're going to have so many more vulnerabilities, but it's not that we give a crap that we have a backlog of 30,000 or 100,000 things. What we give a crap about is legitimate business risk. And is someone going to sell our data on the dark web for $50 and embarrass us? Is someone going to put something in this medical implant that kills people? That's what we actually give a crap about, right? And so we're going to need to find bigger defenses that then block many vulnerabilities. And I don't just mean throw WAFs and band-aids on things. We're going to have to find more genuine things. We're going to have to do actual runtime monitoring of apps that's not just it's up or it's down. I know I sound like such a jerk, but we're not doing
No, I'm actually laughing because literally the next question I have queued up to ask you is like we talked a lot about shift left and the challenges of that historically, but also the opportunities now. There's been a kind of a visible swinging back, even before I'd argue before Gen AI, LLMs, and now agentic coding. There was a rise of ADR, application detection response, cloud application detection response, a big emphasis on runtime reachability, things like that. When you look at that, and it was done partly because shift left tooling produced a lot of that alert fatigue and developers kind of tuned out. How do you think of the tension between finding issues and fixing them early versus, catching the ones in runtime? Like, how do you look at that evolution that the industry is kind of going through right now?
I'd like to do both because we're not going to get everything, right? And even, here's the thing, Chris, is we're finding like serious vulnerabilities and just not fixing and going to prod anyway because everyone else is in prod. Because the CEO pushed to prod on the weekend because he was impatient waiting for us, or she, right? And we're having issues. I think that we're going to need to have some inception types of security so that the AI is generating more secure code to begin with. And then we're going to need to have better catching things. I teach incident response for devs, and it's like a 15 to 30 minute lesson of just, this is when you need to call my team. Please, for the love of God, don't touch anything. And also don't tell everyone. and that's the main gist of the lesson if you want to tell people, because developers will say like, oh, I've been trying to troubleshoot, and they'll have ruined all my evidence and chain of custody and everything. Or they're like, oh yeah, like we did like these 4 band-aids, and then it's still, and it's like, yeah, because they've just been exfiltrating our data and secrets for weeks, right? Like, and they're trying to help, but they don't know what they're looking at. Teach them what they're looking at. They have way more eyes than we do, right? And if they know what to look for, they'll report all sorts of things to us, especially if they know we won't yell at them if they're wrong. Because we're mean. The security people, like I like to think I'm a nice person, but as an industry, we're not the nicest to them all the time. We tell them how wrong they are, that they don't know what they're doing, and we know better. And there's a lot of like arrogance and friction and stuff like that. And so if they're not sure and they're going to come to us, like I want them to know I'm going to be grateful and I'm not going to be a jerk face if they're incorrect.
What's funny is, I've worked with AppSec teams and development teams for quite a while now myself. And I think you're touching on the cultural aspect. I think the things that are often overlooked, like we create these silos because of how we treat people, how we approach them, how we interact with them. We don't build rapport relationships. We don't build trust. We're punitive by nature. You're getting into all the things that I think we overlook and we try to get solved with a tool. And these are human relationships. Like you can't automate that. A VC is not going to come back that for some investment opportunity per se. These are human things. And I was going to ask you too. You talked about a bit about, the runtime emphasis, and that, there is not one perfect answer. Like, you still need shift left, and you need to do what you can, right? But you are going to also have to catch what you do at runtime. And you talked about the aspect of the CEO, and this is where I wanted to take this actually, is, the incentive mismatch, right? Like, developers are not necessarily incentivized to prioritize security, no matter how much lip service or virtue signaling the CEO does publicly. Like, there's still speed to market, revenue, the things that are driving they got to get feature releases out, is competitive dynamics at play. Like, how do you help developers kind of navigate that incentive mismatch? Like, there's just not the incentives often, right, to prioritize security, to be honest.
Have you literally been reading my blog? Like, is that what is happening here with this question? Because I gave a talk last November at OWASP called The Psychology of Bad Code, and it's about behavioral economics, which is the way that it's the science of how human beings make decisions. And I talk a lot about perverse incentives and how basically all the defaults are insecure, and why, like, of course we've set them up literally to fail. And like, it's literally like we're tripping them all day long, and then we're like, haha, you fell down, loser. We pay them more. So we say security matters, Chris. We say it with words, but then we show them repeatedly it definitely does not matter unless we get caught, right? So we will say, oh, fix these bugs. Then we give them 0 time. We build project timelines where there's no time to fix the pen test results or do the code review or do the threat model. And then we're like, where's my threat model? And then when we promote them, it's because they released the new feature faster than the other person, because they got to prod faster, because, the CEO saw them and patted them on the head for things that made money. Because, spoiler alert, capitalism is real. And I don't know about you, but I mean, it doesn't appear like it, but I actually do like money, because we were talking about doing work for free earlier today. But we also have like a lot of defaults that are wrong that I think we could fix. So today I released a video about, so we keep having all these NPM breaches or like attacks in that ecosystem. And a lot of it is on post-install scripts. So what if we just all set post-install scripts to not be allowed to run by default? And then something will break, and we'll have this like moment of friction where we're like, oh crap, what's wrong? And it's like, oh, it has a post-install script. Let me look at it before I let someone run arbitrary code in production. Oh, maybe I should look at that. Yeah, okay, maybe I will. Because not that many are supposed to have a post-install script, so it shouldn't actually happen that often. And then that would just like stop all those attacks like immediately. Why is that not the default, Chris? So I tweeted at NPM and was like, hey, could you change this for me, please, Winky? We'll see what
I think, what's fascinating is, like, I wrote a blog about this. I don't know, it's been a couple of years, but Google, this is kind of tied back because I had to spend a lot of time doing cloud security and things like that. And Google had, changed, the security responsibility matrix, like, that we've known from cloud. And they moved it to like, shared responsibility model is what it was. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I wrote that, like, it sounds great. And it's amazing that it was like 11 years of cloud before we introduced this concept. And like S3 buckets were insecure and open by default for like over a decade. Like these are like systemic changes that these large platform providers can make, whether it's cloud, whether it's, the package ecosystem that you just talked about, that can have a massive impact on like the things that we're dealing with. But we keep, to your point, like using Band-Aids rather than addressing like the systemic failures that are at the root of these things.
One of the things we've done that's been really good is like the framework makers. So for instance, Angular, Vue, and all of a sudden my brain is not working. The other really big one, React, adding output encoding by default, adding a bunch of security features that are really good, naming dangerously set inner HTML so you know it's dangerous and you shouldn't do it, right? By doing that, like they've grossly, like, or maybe the word is greatly reduced the number of cross-site scriptings all across the internet. Like, thank you. If you're a person that worked on that, thank you. Why is every framework not doing that everywhere, right? Why is that not the default?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. I wish I did, but yeah, these platform providers, these package ecosystems, these entities, like I said, have an opportunity to really like a rising tide lifts all ships kind of analogy, right? They can really make a massive impact in the ecosystem. And I think
But they're volunteers, Chris.
You're right. Yeah, they're volunteers, unpaid volunteers a lot of times, but not in the cloud context. Like they are certainly not unpaid or not volunteers. But it's just I feel like these things keep happening, and then eventually, like after a long time, we'll see someone address something. It's like, damn it, like we could have done this 7 years ago, so it's frustrating. I wanted to ask you too, like, again, like to your books, Alice and Bob, the series of books that you have there, like say Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding. If you were to write that, today for a developer who ships with AI assisted code every day, their next teammate may be an agent, for example, what's the first lesson? Has the foundation changed, the context? Like, how would you lead it off now?
So I've actually created kind of a virtual update that you can go grab. So if you go to securemyvibe.ca, I've distilled the entire book into secure coding AI prompts that I'm giving away free if you join my newsletter. So there is a cost, but basically there's 3 levels of prompts, and the first one is just put this in your memory so it runs every single time, and then it applies my secure coding guideline. And it makes the AI tell you every single security assumption it has made. And the assumptions it makes are terrifying. And so from then on, every single person in your entire organization, the CEO or whoever, will get this message that says, I have assumed that you're not going to hand the tokens over like that because that's wildly insecure. And you're not going to use this library that I just made up. And also this and this and that. And then they have to deal with that because they just got told in big bold on the screen, these are problems that I expect you to address. And then it also will have applied the coding guidelines so that it's safer from the beginning. And then I have like level 2 and level 3 prompts for where you want to get more nitty gritty. So it's like I'm making a serverless app or a WebSocket or whatever, and you fill in parts of the prompt. And then it adds basically a ton of security requirements that I've written so that it builds a much better system for you. And so that is my attempt to try to help industry and like kind of extend my book. I also am live streaming every single chapter of the book, which Chris, obviously you need to come on for a chapter. I don't know if you got that email from me yet. But anyway, so once a month I'm doing one of the chapters where I have a guest on and we just talk about every single thing in that chapter and essentially do a university lecture for free, because the universities many times have asked me to come work for them and they offer me less than minimum wage. They want to own all my intellectual property after. They measure their profits in millions and they think that that's even remotely reasonable. And if I'm going to volunteer, like pretty much volunteer, why not just do it my way, right? So, and then just like I did for the first book, the lessons live on YouTube for free, so you can watch them whenever you want to if you don't want to show up live. So essentially I am kind of re-releasing the book for AI, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. I didn't know about that series. I'll definitely check it out and share it with my network. So speaking of that, like, kind of coming to the end of the conversation here, because I know we can keep going for quite a while. Like, where can folks find you? Where can they learn more? You have the YouTube series you just talked about, the newsletter, the secure prompting kind of resource as well. Like, what else should folks keep an eye out for?
So if you go to, just look up She Hacks Purple and you'll find me. Also, I have a brand new podcast called DevSec Station, where it's 5 to 7 minute little mini lessons for software developers. The first season is about securing the supply chain. We'll see what I get into in the next season, but just if you have 5 minutes, you could listen or watch that. Securemyvibe.ca for the AI prompts. If you want a secure coding guideline, there's securecodingguideline.com. But basically just like look up Tanya Janca and you'll find me, and there'll be a lot of free stuff. I have a newsletter, all that. But Chris, I'm hoping you come on my book stream soon.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. That's awesome. And, I'm happy to come on and hang out with you. And honestly, I just want to say I appreciate all you do for the community. Like, I've had your books for quite a while. I've followed your content for a long time myself, and I'm always learning from it, especially from someone who, again, I didn't come from a development background. I came from sysad, networking, help desk, then into cyber, and then cloud. And so, like, I didn't have that background. So, like, it really is helpful for me. And I know that I'm speaking for many people who enjoy your content. So thank you so much, and thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the things you do too.
Absolutely. Take care.